A wolf will starve before it begs. A dog will beg before it starves. Somewhere in the last few thousand years, one of them made a trade. It gave up the forest. It gave up the hunt. It gave up the part of its brain that says, I can survive without you. And in exchange, it got a bowl that's always full, a leash that always leads somewhere warm, and a human who scratches its head and says, good boy. You didn't notice the moment you made the same trade. Nobody does. It doesn't happen in one dramatic decision, one bad loan, one reckless swipe. It happens quietly, the first time you check an app before you check your actual bank balance. It happens the first time a three-digit number makes you feel more proud than the money sitting in your account does. And by the time you notice it's happening, it's already been happening for years. Here's the sentence that should bother you. A high credit score was never built to measure your wealth. It was built to measure how well you've been trained to want debt. And the most obedient animals, the ones who get the biggest bowl, the lowest rates, the shiniest offers in the mail, are the ones who carry a balance every single month, on schedule like clockwork. Sit with that for a second, because it's about to get worse before it gets useful. Every domesticated species on Earth shares a strange, almost eerie set of traits. Softer features, floppier ears, reduced fear response, a brain that physically shrinks in the exact regions responsible for danger detection and independent survival. In one of the most famous experiments in modern biology, researchers in Siberia bred silver foxes for a single trait, tameness, nothing else. Within a few generations, without anyone selecting for it directly, the foxes' skulls changed shape. Their ears started to droop. Their coats changed color. Their stress hormones dropped. They stopped running from human hands. Nobody forced those foxes into a cage. They were selected, generation after generation, for how easily they accepted one. Tameness rewired the entire animal, and the animal never noticed the rewiring. It just felt like comfort. Now look at what a credit score actually rewards, piece by piece, because the formula reads less like a wealth report and more like a breeding chart. 35% of it is payment history, proof you show up on schedule every month, like something that can be counted on. 30% is utilization, how hard you're currently pulling against the leash, but never quite hard enough to snap it. The rest rewards age of accounts, how many different types of debt you juggle, and how often you go looking for a new collar to try on. Not one part of that formula asks what you own. Not one part asks if you could survive a year without a paycheck. It only asks one question, over and over, in 100 different disguises. How predictably can you be counted on to owe? A person with zero debt, a paid-off house, and 6 figures sitting quietly in savings can carry a lower score than a 24-year-old juggling 3 credit cards and a car loan, paid responsibly but constantly active. That's not a glitch in the system. That's the entire design working exactly as intended. You are not being measured for freedom. You are being measured for docility, dressed up in a number that feels like an achievement. And this is where it stops being about banks and starts being about you. Because somewhere in your chest right now, there's a small, quiet pride attached to that number. You felt it. That little flicker of satisfaction when the app opens and the needle sits in the green instead of the red. Nobody sat you down and taught you to feel that. It was installed the same way a variable reward installs itself into a gambler at a slot machine, not because the payout is guaranteed, but because it isn't. You don't know exactly when the number will move or by how much, so you keep checking. You keep swiping. You keep feeding the very machine that's supposed to be feeding you. This isn't a metaphor stretched for effect. It's the same neurological circuitry, studied and documented for decades. Uncertain, intermittent rewards are more addictive than rewards you can predict with certainty. A score that moves just unpredictably enough keeps you hooked, and just consistently enough to convince you the hook is discipline, when really it's closer to a leash you keep tightening yourself. Here's the part almost nobody says out loud, because it sounds too cynical to be true, except it's publicly on record. Major lenders have openly discussed building reward programs around this exact behavior. Not punishment for a low score, which is old news, but positive reinforcement for climbing one. Lower rates as a treat. Higher limits as a treat. Better offers waiting the moment the number ticks upward. It's marketed as generosity. It's framed as the bank finally being on your side. But think for a moment about what that structure is actually training you to optimize for. Not how much can I own. Not how fast can I become free of all of this. It's training you to optimize for how do I keep this number climbing, and the fastest, most efficient way to climb it isn't paying things off completely and walking away. It's carrying just enough, just consistently enough, to look reliable to an institution that profits every single month you remain reliable. Every treat in that system exists to keep you inside the system. None of it exists to help you leave. You were never the customer they were hoping for. You were the customer they bred, one approved application at a time. Now here's the twist that should genuinely unsettle you, because it flips everything you just heard on its head. The animal that actually gets punished in this system isn't the reckless one, it's the wild one. The person who pays cash for everything, avoids debt entirely, and simply refuses to play the game is treated by the model as unpredictable. A thin file, an unknown risk, a wolf nobody can rate or price. Lenders don't reward independence. They reward legibility. They need to be able to read you, forecast you, price your risk down to a decimal point. Full financial freedom doesn't just fail to help your score. It can actively confuse a model built entirely around watching you owe something, somewhere, on time. So the system isn't only training you to accept debt as normal. It's training you to quietly distrust the version of yourself that never needed it in the first place. That version feels foreign, unverified, almost suspicious to a machine that only knows how to trust obedience. That's the real cage in all of this, and it was never made of bars. It was made of approval. But here's where the wolf still holds an advantage the dog forgot it ever had, because domestication traits, biologically speaking, are not a permanent sentence. They're reversible under the right pressure. Feral dogs left long enough without that steady reward structure, without the bowl refilling on schedule, start regaining traits their ancestors buried generations ago. Sharper senses return. Faster stress responses return. Independent behavior, the kind that doesn't wait for permission, starts to resurface almost on its own. Which means the instinct isn't gone in you either. It was never erased. It's just been sitting quiet underneath a stack of monthly minimum payments and push notifications designed to keep it that way. Reclaiming it doesn't mean burning your credit file to the ground or pretending the number stops mattering entirely. That's not freedom. That's just a different flavor of foolishness. And a wrecked score can become its own trap the moment you need a mortgage, a lease, or a car. The shift is smaller than that, and far more dangerous to the system than anything dramatic could ever be. It's simply refusing to let the score become the goal itself. Let it stay a tool, used exactly as much as it's needed, and not 1 point more. Track your net worth instead. What you actually own, minus what you actually owe. Watch how differently your decisions start to feel once that becomes the number your stomach reacts to, instead of a 3-digit score sitting in an app designed by the very institutions profiting from your obedience. Because a credit score can sit at a flawless number while you're worth nothing underneath it. But you cannot fake actually owning something. Assets don't care how reliably you've been trained to carry a balance. They just sit there, quietly, belonging to you, whether or not any institution ever approves. The wolf that turns and walks back toward the tree line isn't being reckless. It's just remembered, somewhere in its bones, that it was never really a pet to begin with. It was only ever convinced that it was, one comfortable bowl at a time. And once you see the leash for exactly what it is, the strangest part of all is this. The collar doesn't disappear. It's still there, still around your neck if you want it to be. You just stop mistaking it for a medal. There's one more number quietly shaping your life the exact same way this one does. Most people have never even heard its name. and it decides more about your future, your insurance, your job applications, your rent than your credit score ever will.